A puppy begs the vet to not put down its mother, but when he realizes why, he shouts, "Call 911 now!" A storm rages outside as a desperate man pushes two trembling dogs through the clinic doors. He throws money on the counter, demanding the mother be put down instantly. The vet lifts the syringe until the tiny puppy leaps between his hand and its mother, pawing at her side with desperate cries. Something is wrong. The vet looks closer and finds a hidden mark beneath her stitched skin. Suddenly, everything changes. The man's story doesn't add up. The dog isn't dying, she's hiding something. Darkness falls as the clinic's lights cut out. A knife glints. The dogs howl. The vet realizes he's no longer fighting to save just an animal's life, but something far more human and far more dangerous. What secret is buried under the dog's skin? And why is someone willing to kill to keep it hidden? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The wind howled through the dark streets of Willow Bend, rattling the windows of the small animal clinic where Dr. Rowan Kincaid was finishing up his paperwork for the night. Rain pelted against the glass in steady sheets, creating a drumming sound that usually brought him comfort on late evenings like this. But tonight, something felt different. The air was charged with an unsettling energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. At 43 years old, Rowan had seen his share of emergencies, but nothing could have prepared him for what was about to burst through his clinic doors. The ancient wall clock showed 11:37 when he heard the violent slam of a car door outside, followed by hurried footsteps splashing through puddles. The clinic's front door flew open with such force that it banged against the wall, making the bell above it jangle wildly. A stocky man with a ruddy complexion stumbled in, his work jacket dripping onto the linoleum floor. In his arms, he carried a large shepherd mix, its fur matted with blood and rain. A smaller dog, clearly a puppy of the same breed, followed close behind, whimpering and leaving wet paw prints across the floor. "Need this dog put down. Right now." The man's voice was gruff, his words clipped with urgency that seemed excessive even for an emergency situation. Rowan rose from behind the counter, his tired grey eyes taking in the scene before him. "Sir, I'm Doctor." "Kincaid, let me examine the dog first. No time for that." The man, who would later identify himself as Wade Torrey, practically threw a wad of cash onto the counter. "Just do it. I'll pay whatever." The shepherd mix lay limp in Wade's arms, but Rowan could see she was breathing. Her flank had been recently stitched, crude work, definitely not professional. The puppy circled anxiously, letting out small whines that tugged at Rowan's heart. "Please, set her on the examination table." Rowan instructed, gesturing to the steel table in the corner. His voice remained calm, despite the growing unease in his stomach. Something about this situation felt wrong, terribly wrong. Wade deposited the dog none too gently on the table. "Look, Doc, I ain't got all night. Just give her the shot and be done with it." Rowan approached slowly, his worn lab coat rustling as he moved. The shepherd mix lifted her head slightly, her eyes meeting his with an intelligence that made him pause. There was no sign of aggression, no indication of rabies or other conditions that might warrant immediate euthanasia. "Sir, I need to understand why you're requesting euthanasia." "This dog appears to be in stable condition despite her injuries." Rowan's voice carried the authority of his years of experience, even as doubt about his failing practice nagged at the back of his mind. "Ain't gotta explain nothing. Money's on the counter." Wade's fingers drummed impatiently against the metal table. "Just do your job." The puppy had managed to scramble up onto a nearby chair and was watching the proceedings with unusual intensity. Rowan noticed how its eyes never left its mother, particularly the area where the strange stitches crossed her flank. With growing reluctance, Rowan went to prepare the euthanasia solution. His hands moved automatically through the familiar motions, muscle memory from years of having to perform this sad duty when it was truly necessary. But every instinct he possessed was screaming that this wasn't right. As he approached with the syringe, something extraordinary happened. The puppy launched itself from the chair, landing on the examination table with surprising agility. Before Rowan could react, it wedged itself between his hand and the mother dog's body, its small paws scratching insistently at the stitched area. "Get that mutt out of the way." Wade lunged forward, but Rowan had already pulled back, watching as the puppy continued its desperate attempt to communicate something about the stitches. Time seemed to slow as Rowan observed the interaction. The mother dog, despite her apparent weakness, turned her head to nuzzle her pup, and in that moment, Rowan saw something that made his blood run cold. A slight bulge under the stitches that didn't match any natural anatomy he knew. "Hold on," Rowan said, setting the syringe down deliberately. "These stitches are recent." "Who performed them?" Wade's face darkened. "What's it matter? Just do what you're paid for." But Rowan wasn't listening anymore. His focus was entirely on the mysterious sutures and the puppy's persistent indication of them. Years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now, every one of them was telling him that he was standing on the edge of something dangerous. The mother dog's eyes met his again, and in them, he saw not the glazed look of an animal ready to die, but a clear, pleading intelligence. The puppy whined softly, still pawing at the stitches, and Rowan made his decision. "I'm sorry, but I can't perform this procedure without a proper examination first." He stepped back from the table, positioning himself between Wade and the dogs. "Something isn't right here, and I need to understand what's going on before I take any irreversible action." Wade's face contorted with rage. "You don't understand. This needs to happen now." "No," Rowan said firmly, surprised by the strength in his own voice. "What I understand is that this dog has recently undergone some kind of procedure, and her puppy is trying to tell us something about it. I'm not going to euthanize a healthy animal without cause." The storm outside seemed to grow louder, matching the tension building in the small examination room. Wade's hands clenched into fists at his sides, and Rowan could see the man's control starting to slip, but he stood his ground, his decision made. The puppy's desperate actions had done more than just interrupt a procedure. They had awakened something in Rowan that had been dormant for too long. The spark of suspicion that had started as a small flame was now burning bright, pushing away the shadows of self-doubt that had plagued him in recent years. "I'm going to examine those stitches," Rowan announced, reaching for a pair of surgical scissors. "Whatever's going on here, we're going to get to the bottom of it." Wade's face went from red to pale in an instant. "You can't do that! You have no right!" But Rowan had already made up his mind. The puppy's behavior, Wade's suspicious urgency, the irregular stitching, it all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple request for euthanasia. And despite his recent struggles, despite the weight of past failures that had been dragging him down, Dr. Rowan Kincaid was still a veterinarian who had sworn to protect the animals in his care. The shepherd mix lay quietly on the table, as if she understood that everything hinged on this moment. Her puppy pressed against her side, both protector and revealer of whatever secret lay beneath those crude stitches, and in that small, storm-racked clinic in Willow Bend, with rain hammering against the windows and tension thick in the air, a crucial decision had been made, one that would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. The suspicion that had begun with a puppy's desperate intervention was about to unravel something much larger than a simple late-night emergency call. As Rowan stepped forward with the scissors, he knew there would be no turning back from whatever he was about to discover. Dr. Rowan Kincaid straightened his shoulders, drawing on years of experience to maintain his professional composure. "I'm sorry, sir, but there are procedures we need to follow. By law, any stray animal must be held for 72 hours before we can consider euthanasia." The stocky man's face darkened. "Name's Wade Torrey, and this ain't a stray. It's my dog." His fingers drummed against the examination table with increasing agitation. June Lyles, Rowan's veteran veterinary technician, moved quietly around the table, her auburn hair neatly tied back as she began examining the shepherd mix. Her practiced hands gently parted the wet fur around a line of stitches on the dog's flank. She caught Rowan's eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. "These stitches," she said softly. "I don't recognize the technique. Doesn't look like Dr. Miller's work from Cedar Grove, or anyone else's around here." The puppy, which had been circling anxiously, suddenly lunged forward and began scratching frantically at its mother's side, right where the mysterious stitches were. Its small paws scrabbled against the fur with desperate determination. Wade stepped forward aggressively. "Just put the dog down. You've got your money." Rowan felt his unease deepening with every passing moment. The mother dog's vital signs were stable. There was no medical emergency that would justify immediate euthanasia. And now these strange stitches. "We need to do an X-ray first," Rowan announced, his voice firm despite Wade's looming presence. "June, would you help me get her into position?" "Like hell you will." Wade's face had grown red with anger. "I'm telling you to put this dog down now." June had already moved to help, her movements quick and efficient as she positioned the portable X-ray machine. She worked with the calm competence that came from years of experience, though Rowan could see the tension in her shoulders. "Sir," Rowan said, keeping his voice steady, "I cannot and will not euthanize an animal without proper cause and documentation. If you'd like to wait in the reception area—" "I'm not going anywhere," Wade growled, but he did take a step back when June positioned herself protectively near the examination table. The X-ray machine hummed to life. Rowan studied the developing image on the digital display and felt his breath catch. There, clearly visible beneath the line of stitches, was a metallic capsule about the size of his thumb. "June," he said quietly, "are you seeing this?" She nodded, her expression grim. "That's no medical implant I've ever seen." The puppy was still pawing at its mother's side, as if it somehow knew what was hidden beneath those mysterious stitches. The shepherd mix lifted her head slightly, her eyes meeting Rowan's with an intelligence that seemed to plead for help. Wade's insistence now made terrible sense. This wasn't about a sick dog at all. This was about whatever was hidden inside her. Rowan's mind raced through the possibilities, none of them good. The capsule's size and shape, the obvious attempt to conceal it, Wade's desperate push for immediate euthanasia. It all pointed to something illegal. "Mr. Torrey," Rowan said, forcing himself to sound calm while his heart pounded, "I'm afraid I'm going to need to see some proof of ownership for this dog, and I'll need to report these unusual findings to—" Wade's hand slammed down on the examination table, making both the mother dog and puppy flinch. "You'll do no such thing. Put the dog down now, or you'll regret it." June had quietly positioned herself near the clinic's phone, her hand hovering close to the receiver. Rowan could see her fingers trembling slightly, but her voice was steady as she spoke. "Dr. Kincaid, should I call Dr. Miller for a consultation?" It was their prearranged code for contacting the authorities. Rowan gave a slight nod, keeping his eyes on Wade, whose aggressive stance had taken on an even more menacing quality. The shepherd mix let out a low whine, and her puppy pressed against her side protectively. The scene struck Rowan as a perfect metaphor for his position right now, standing guard over the vulnerable despite the threat looming before him. Years of self-doubt and professional setbacks had left their mark, but in this moment he felt his purpose with crystal clarity. "I'm invoking the 72-hour hold," he stated firmly. "These dogs will remain under clinic care while we investigate this situation properly." Wade's expression twisted with rage, his hand moving toward his jacket pocket. "You're making a big mistake, Doc." "Last chance to do this the easy way." The metallic capsule showed clearly on the X-ray display, a damning piece of evidence that transformed this stormy night from a routine emergency call into something far more dangerous. Rowan stood his ground, though, knowing that whatever was happening here, he couldn't let these animals be harmed to cover up someone else's crimes. June's fingers closed around the phone receiver, her other hand already dialing. The puppy continued its determined pawing at its mother's stitches, as if trying to help expose the truth hidden beneath her skin. Wade's weathered face contorted with barely contained rage. "I'm taking my dogs now," he growled, reaching for the German Shepherd mix's collar. His knuckles were white with tension, a vein pulsing at his temple. Dr. Rowan Kincaid stepped between Wade and the examination table, his heart hammering, but his voice steady. "I'm afraid I can't allow that, Mr. Torrey. These animals show signs of potential abuse, and that implant raises serious concerns about their treatment." June Lyles moved quietly but purposefully toward the front desk, her auburn hair catching the fluorescent lights as she reached for the phone. Her fingers trembled slightly as she dialed, but her voice remained remarkably composed. "Deputy Morell, this is June from Willow Bend Animal Clinic. We need your assistance immediately." Wade's head snapped toward her, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "Put that phone down," he snarled, taking a menacing step in her direction. "Mr. Torrey." Rowan's firm voice drew Wade's attention back. "Let's all stay calm. The police can help sort this out." He maintained eye contact with Wade while carefully preparing a syringe of naloxone, knowing the mother dog needed immediate medical attention. Wade began pacing the small examination room like a caged animal, his boots scuffing against the linoleum floor. The overhead lights cast shifting shadows across his face as he moved, making his expression even more threatening. "You're making a big mistake, Doc." A real big mistake. June kept her distance, but continued speaking quietly into the phone, providing details about their situation. Her free hand gripped the edge of the desk, knuckles white, but her voice remained steady. Rowan administered the naloxone to the mother dog with practiced efficiency, keeping one eye on Wade's increasingly erratic movements. The German Shepherd mix lay still on the table, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her pup huddled beneath the examination table, whimpering softly. "Deputy Morell is on her way," June announced, her voice carrying a hint of relief. She positioned herself near the cabinet containing emergency supplies, her body tense but ready. Wade's pacing became more agitated, his path creating an ever-tightening circle around the room. "You got no right to keep my property." He spat. "No right at all?" The mother dog's breathing began to strengthen as the naloxone took effect. Her eyes fluttered open, and suddenly her entire body went rigid. Her gaze fixed on something beyond the clinic's front windows, and a low growl rumbled in her throat. Rowan followed her line of sight to Wade's truck idling in the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. Something about the vehicle tugged at his memory. Something important. His eyes drifted to the bulletin board near the reception desk, where various notices and alerts were pinned. There, partially hidden behind a vaccine reminder, was the Amber Alert notice he'd seen earlier that day. His blood ran cold as he read the details again. 8-year-old girl, last seen 3 days ago. Witnesses reported a dark-colored pickup truck with a distinctive dent in the passenger door. Through the clinic windows, he could clearly see the same distinctive damage on Wade's truck. The mother dog's growl intensified, her eyes never leaving the vehicle. Despite her weakened state, she attempted to rise from the table, straining toward the truck with single-minded determination. She knows, Rowan thought, his mind racing. Whatever's in that truck, she knows. June must have noticed his expression change because she moved closer, speaking under her breath. "Rowan, what is it?" Before he could respond, Wade's pacing brought him between them and the door, his stance becoming more threatening with each pass. "Last chance, Doc," he warned, his right hand drifting toward his jacket pocket. "Give me those dogs, or things are going to get real unpleasant." The mother dog's growl turned into a series of sharp, urgent barks, her entire body trembling with the effort to stand. Her pup emerged from under the table, adding its own high-pitched yips to the cacophony. Rowan's mind worked furiously, trying to figure out how to keep everyone safe until help arrived. The weight of his realization about the truck and the missing girl made every second feel critical. He could hear distant sirens, but they weren't close enough yet. "The dogs stay here, Mr. Torrey," he said firmly, positioning himself to block Wade's access to the animals. "And I think you should stay as well. We have some questions about your truck." Wade's face twisted into something ugly and dangerous. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Doc," he growled, his hand now clearly reaching for something concealed in his jacket. "You really don't." June had edged closer to the phone again, her fingers hovering over the keypad, ready to call for additional help if needed. The sirens were getting louder, but the tension in the room had reached a breaking point. The mother dog continued her desperate attempts to get up, her eyes locked on the truck outside, while her pup pressed against her protectively. Their combined distress filled the small examination room with an atmosphere of urgent warning. Rowan's mind raced through the implications of what he'd discovered. If he was right about the connection between Wade's truck and the missing girl, every second could be crucial. But one wrong move now could make the situation exponentially worse. "Deputy Morell will be here any minute," he said calmly, though his heart was pounding. "Why don't we all take a seat and wait for her to arrive? We can sort this out properly." Wade's circling had brought him dangerously close to the front door. His eyes darted between Rowan, June, the dogs, and the exit, calculating his options. The sound of approaching sirens seemed to make him even more agitated. "You should have just done what I asked," Wade snarled, his hand now clearly gripping something in his jacket pocket. "Should have just put that dog down and minded your own business." The mother dog's barking reached a fever pitch, her effort to stand becoming more frantic. Her pup pressed against her side, still scratching at the area where they'd discovered the implant, as if trying to communicate something urgent. June had managed to position herself near the emergency exit, her hand on the panic button installed beneath the counter. Her eyes met Rowan's briefly, silently communicating her readiness to act if needed. The wail of sirens grew closer, and red and blue lights began to flash across the clinic's windows, reflecting off the medical equipment and creating an almost strobing effect in the examination room. Wade's trapped expression became even more dangerous under the shifting lights. "Mr. Torrey," Rowan said, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Whatever's going on here, making things worse won't help your situation. Let's wait for Deputy Morell and talk this through." But Wade's expression told him the man was past listening to reason. The approaching law enforcement had pushed him to a breaking point, and Rowan could see the moment Wade decided to act. The only question was what form that action would take, and whether they could prevent it from turning tragic. The tension in the clinic's examination room crackled like static electricity before a storm. Wade's weathered face contorted with barely contained rage as he took another step toward Hazel, who lay still recovering on the metal table. "I'm taking my dogs now," he growled, reaching for the German Shepherd mix's collar. His knuckles were white with tension, a vein pulsing at his temple. Dr. Rowan Kincaid stepped between Wade and the examination table, his heart hammering but his voice steady. "I'm afraid I can't allow that, Mr. Torrey. These animals show signs of potential abuse, and that implant raises serious concerns about their treatment." June Lyles moved quietly but purposefully towards the front desk, her fingers sliding her phone from her pocket. With practiced calm, she began recording Wade's increasingly aggressive behavior, keeping the device partially hidden behind a stack of medical files. "You got no right!" Wade's voice rose sharply. "I paid you. They're my property." Rowan stood his ground, though his throat felt dry. "Actually, I do have the right. Under state law, if a veterinarian suspects animal cruelty, we're required to report it and can hold the animal for investigation." He gestured to the strange surgical site on Hazel's flank. "That implant wasn't placed by any legitimate vet, I know." Wade's eyes darted between Rowan, June, and the dogs. His breathing grew heavy, like a cornered animal's. "You're making a big mistake, Doc." "A real big mistake." June continued filming as she pretended to sort through paperwork, capturing Wade's threatening stance and tone. Her hand trembled slightly, but she kept the phone steady, knowing this evidence could be crucial. "I've already contacted the authorities," Rowan said firmly, though this was a bluff. He knew June was trying to reach Deputy Morell, but hadn't confirmed if she'd gotten through. They'll want to examine that implant. Wade's face went from red to pale in an instant. His eyes found the electrical panel near the clinic's back door, and before anyone could react, he lunged for it. The sharp snap of circuit breakers echoed through the room, plunging the clinic into darkness. June gasped as her phone screen became the only source of light. The sudden darkness felt thick, oppressive. Through its murky depths came the sound of Wade's boots on the linoleum floor and the metallic click of something opening. "Last chance, Doc." Wade's voice came from the darkness, closer now. "Let me take the dogs and walk away." A thin beam of emergency lighting flickered on, casting weird shadows across the room. In Wade's hand, a box cutter's blade gleamed dully. He had circled around toward Hazel, his intent clear in his rigid posture. "Mr. Torrey," Rowan said, trying to keep his voice calm while his mind raced. "Put that down. You're only making things worse for yourself." But Wade wasn't listening anymore. With a guttural sound of desperation, he lunged toward Hazel with the blade extended. The German Shepherd mix, still groggy from the medications but alert enough to sense the threat, growled low in her throat. June tried to circle around to help, but Wade's erratic movements had her backing into a corner near the supply cabinets. Her phone kept recording, capturing the nightmare unfolding in the dim emergency light. Rowan made a split-second decision. "Hazel, guard!" he commanded, unclipping her restraint in one swift motion. The dog might be their only chance. Hazel exploded off the examination table with surprising strength, her powerful body slamming into Wade's chest. The box cutter clattered to the floor as Wade stumbled backward, the air driven from his lungs. The dog's teeth didn't break skin, but her message was clear. She would defend her allies. Wade scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of terror now rather than rage. Without the weapon, without the advantage of surprise, his confidence evaporated. He backed toward the clinic's front door, Hazel's amber eyes tracking his every move. "This isn't over!" he spat, but his voice shook. Then he turned and fled, the door banging behind him. Through the window, they could see him running for his truck, his footsteps crunching on the gravel parking lot. June's hands were shaking as she stopped the recording, her breath coming in quick gasps. "I got it all," she managed. "Every threat, the attack, everything." Rowan knelt beside Hazel, checking her over while his own heart raced. The German Shepherd mix pressed against his leg, her body still tense, her attention fixed on the door where Wade had disappeared. In the distance, they could hear his truck's engine roaring to life. The emergency lights cast everything in an eerie glow as June fumbled with her phone, trying again to reach Deputy Morell. The clip she'd recorded would serve as solid evidence of Wade's violent intentions, but both she and Rowan knew this was far from over. Wade's desperate actions had only confirmed their suspicions. Whatever secret that implant held, it was dangerous enough to drive a man to violence. Rain pelted the parking lot of Willowbend Animal Clinic as Hazel bounded across the slick asphalt, her paws splashing through puddles that reflected the dim glow of security lights. The German Shepherd mix moved with desperate purpose, making a beeline for Wade's mud-splattered truck. Her claws scraped frantically at the seam where the truck bed met the tailgate, leaving desperate marks in the metal. Dr. Rowan Kincaid's heart pounded as he followed the dog through the downpour, his lab coat already soaked through. The pieces were starting to come together in his mind. The strange capsule they'd found inside Hazel, Wade's violent insistence on euthanizing her, the Amber Alert about the missing 8-year-old girl. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. A muffled thump came from inside the truck bed. Rowan froze, straining to hear over the drumming rain. There it was again. And then, unmistakably, the sound of a child's cough. "Oh my God," he whispered, his blood running cold despite the humid summer night. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The capsule wasn't just a tracking device, it was connected to the truck's locking mechanism somehow. Wade had surgically implanted it in Hazel to keep tabs on her, knowing she would try to return to the truck. Return to whoever was trapped inside. June stood a few yards back, her phone still recording as she maintained her connection with Deputy Cass Morrell. Her auburn hair was plastered to her face, but her hands remained steady even as her eyes widened in horror at the sounds coming from the truck. "Call 911 now!" Rowan shouted, his voice carrying over the storm. "There's someone alive in there." "A child." June was already moving, her fingers flying across her phone's wet screen as she relayed the urgent message to Cass. "There's a kid in the truck. Send everyone. We need help at the clinic right now." Hazel whined, her claws still working at the seam of the truck bed. The sound tore at Rowan's heart. This loyal dog had been trying to tell them all along. When she'd scratched at her own surgical site, when she'd fixated on the truck, she'd been trying to lead them to the truth. The rain continued to pour as Rowan moved closer to the truck, pressing his ear against the cold metal. "Hello," he called out, trying to keep his voice calm and steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Can you hear me in there?" Another thump, louder this time, followed by what sounded like muffled words. Rowan's hands shook as he examined the truck bed's locking mechanism. The capsule they'd found in Hazel had to be more than just a tracking device. It was probably an electronic key of some kind, designed to interface with whatever sophisticated lock Wade had installed. "June!" he called out. "We need that capsule from the X-ray room. It might be the key." June was already sprinting back toward the clinic entrance, her shoes splashing through puddles. Hazel stayed by the truck, her amber eyes never leaving the spot where the sounds were coming from. Her fur was soaked through, but she showed no signs of moving away from her vigil. Rowan placed his hand against the truck's metal side, hoping to offer some comfort to whoever was trapped inside. "Help is coming," he said firmly. "We're going to get you out of there." "You're not alone." A small hand pressed against the inside of the truck bed, creating a slight bulge in the metal. Rowan's throat tightened with emotion. This was why he'd become a veterinarian in the first place, to help those who couldn't help themselves. He'd never imagined that instinct would lead him here, to this rain-soaked parking lot, trying to save not just an injured dog, but a kidnapped child as well. In the distance, sirens began to wail. June burst back through the clinic doors, the metal capsule clutched in her hand. She'd wrapped it in a surgical towel to keep it dry, thinking ahead even in the midst of crisis. That was June. Always practical, always prepared. "Here," she gasped, pressing the capsule into Rowan's outstretched hand. "But how do we use it?" Rowan examined the truck's lock more closely, running his fingers along the edges until he found what felt like a small electronic panel, cleverly disguised as part of the handle mechanism. "There has to be a way," he muttered, turning the capsule over in his hands. "Wade wouldn't have gone to all this trouble for nothing." Hazel nudged his hand with her nose, her eyes seeming to plead with him. The dog's intelligence and devotion were extraordinary. She'd endured surgery, escaped from Wade, and led them all here, never giving up on her mission to help the child trapped in the truck. The sirens grew louder as Rowan carefully pressed the capsule against different parts of the lock, searching for any kind of response. June kept filming, documenting everything for evidence while maintaining her call with Cass. The rain continued to fall, but none of them noticed anymore. All their attention was focused on the truck and its precious cargo. "Come on," Rowan whispered, moving the capsule slightly to the left. "Come on, give us a sign." A faint click sounded from within the lock mechanism, followed by a soft whir. Hazel's ears perked up, and she gave an encouraging bark. Rowan's heart leaped as he felt something shift under his fingers. "That's it!" he exclaimed, working his fingers under the edge of the tailgate. "June, help me with this." Together, they pulled on the tailgate, feeling resistance at first, and then suddenly release. The metal groaned as it lowered, revealing the dark interior of the truck bed. Hazel immediately jumped up, disappearing into the shadows. A child's sob broke through the sound of the rain, followed by the unmistakable sound of Hazel's tail thumping against the truck bed. June's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a scene that made Rowan's chest tight with emotion. A young girl curled up in the corner of the truck bed, with Hazel pressed protectively against her side. "It's okay," Rowan said softly, keeping his movements slow and gentle as he reached toward her. "You're safe now. We're here to help you." The girl looked up at him with tear-filled eyes, her face pale but determined. She had one arm wrapped around Hazel's neck, clinging to the dog like a lifeline. In that moment, Rowan understood exactly why Wade had been so desperate to eliminate Hazel. The dog hadn't just been a witness to his crime, she'd been actively fighting against it, trying to protect this child all along. Red and blue lights began to flash across the wet pavement as police cars pulled into the parking lot. June's voice was steady as she updated Cass on their discovery, but Rowan could hear the emotion underneath her professional tone. This night had changed everything, for all of them. The girl's grip on Hazel loosened slightly as she looked up at Rowan. "She kept coming back," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "He couldn't make her stay away. She kept trying to help me." "That's what heroes do," Rowan said gently, offering his hand to help her out of the truck bed. "They never give up on someone who needs them." As police officers swarmed the parking lot and paramedics rushed forward with blankets and medical equipment, Rowan watched Hazel stay close to the girl's side, her protective instinct still as strong as ever. The dog's loyalty had cracked open a terrible secret, but in doing so, she'd saved a life and brought truth to light. June appeared at his side, her phone finally lowered now that the immediate crisis had passed. "You were right," she said quietly. "About Wade, about Hazel, about all of it. You trusted your instincts." Rowan nodded, watching as the paramedics carefully checked the girl's vital signs while Hazel supervised every move. The rain was finally beginning to let up, as if nature itself recognized that the worst of the storm had passed. But Rowan knew this was just the beginning. There would be questions to answer, statements to give, and a long road ahead for everyone involved. For now, though, he allowed himself to feel the weight of what they'd accomplished. A child was safe, a criminal would face justice, and a brave dog's devotion had made it all possible. In all his years of veterinary practice, Rowan had never been more certain of the profound connection between humans and animals, or more grateful for the instincts that had led him to this moment. Thunder cracked overhead as Rowan's mind raced with desperate calculations. Every second counted now. Through the downpour, he could see Wade fumbling with his keys, trying to reach his truck. They couldn't let him drive away, not with an innocent child trapped inside. "June!" Rowan shouted over the storm. "Get the bolt cutters from the maintenance closet, now!" Without hesitation, June sprinted back into the darkened clinic. The emergency lights cast an eerie glow as she navigated through familiar shadows to retrieve the heavy tool. Her hands trembled, but her grip was firm. She wouldn't let fear slow her down. Meanwhile, Rowan's eyes darted around the parking lot, searching for anything they could use. His gaze landed on an oxygen tank secured to the clinic's exterior wall, meant for emergency animal transport, but never more crucial than now. With quick, purposeful strides, he unhooked it from its mount and rolled it toward the truck's bay door. Wade had reached his vehicle, cursing as he struggled with wet keys. "Back off, Kincaid. This isn't your business. It became my business when you brought crime into my clinic." Rowan shot back, buying precious seconds. He positioned the oxygen tank carefully under the bay door, wedging it firmly to prevent it from closing. The rain made everything slick, but determination steadied his hands. A muffled thump from inside the truck bed renewed his urgency. Someone was alive in there, someone counting on them. Rowan grabbed a tire iron from his own vehicle's emergency kit and dropped to his knees beside Wade's front tire. The metal tool felt cold and heavy in his grip as he jammed it against the valve stem. "What are you doing?" Ward roared, abandoning his keys to lunge toward Rowan. "Get away from my truck!" But June emerged from the clinic at that moment, bolt cutters raised like a weapon. "Stay back!" she commanded, her voice stronger than she felt. The authority in her tone made Wade hesitate, just long enough for Rowan to complete his task. Air hissed from the tire, the truck settling lower on its suspension. Rain streamed down June's face as she rushed to the truck bed, guided by Hazel's continued pawing at the hidden seam. The dog's wet fur was plastered to her body, but her determination never wavered. Together, human and canine showed them exactly where to cut. "Hold him off!" Rowan called to June as he moved to help her. She positioned herself between Wade and the truck, bolt cutters at the ready. The man's face contorted with rage, but he kept his distance, aware that backup was already on the way. Rowan ran his fingers along the seam until he found what they were looking for, a cunningly concealed latch mechanism hidden from casual inspection. June handed him the bolt cutters, and he lined them up carefully. One wrong move could harm whoever was inside. The tool's handles were slippery with rain, but Rowan's grip was sure as he squeezed them together. The snap of metal breaking seemed to echo across the parking lot. Wade cursed again, more desperately this time, but June stood her ground. Rowan worked his fingers into the gap they'd created, feeling for the release. Something clicked, and the bed compartment's hydraulic system engaged with a soft hiss. "Help me lift it!" Rowan called to June. She kept one eye on Wade as she moved to assist, and together they raised the heavy panel. The compartment's interior was dark, but movement caught their eye immediately. There, curled in the cramped space, lay a small figure. Tansy Rourke's dark hair was matted, her clothes dirty, and her wrists bound with zip ties, but her chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Her eyes, though frightened, were alert and aware as she looked up at her rescuers. "It's okay," June said softly, reaching down toward the girl. "We're here to help you. You're safe now." Relief flooded through Rowan with such force that his knees nearly buckled. They'd found her. They'd actually found her. And she was alive. Hazel whined and tried to climb into the compartment, clearly recognizing the child she'd been protecting all along. Tansy's voice was hoarse but clear. Is Hazel okay?" He said he'd hurt her if I made any noise. "She's just fine," Rowan assured her, his heart aching at the girl's concern for the dog even in her own dire situation. "She's the one who helped us find you. Let's get you out of there." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the rain. Deputy Morell's backup was finally arriving. Wade backed away from the scene, but June kept the bolt cutters raised, ensuring he wouldn't make a break for it before the police arrived. Rowan reached into the compartment, his gentle hands helping Tansy sit up. She winced at the movement, stiff from being confined in the small space. "I'm Dr. Kincaid," he said softly. "I'm a veterinarian, but I promise we're going to get you proper medical care right away. Can you tell me if you're hurt anywhere?" "Just sore," Tansy whispered. "And thirsty. Really thirsty." June was already rushing to the clinic to get water, leaving Rowan to help the girl out of her prison. The compartment had been lined with blankets, a twisted attempt at comfort that did nothing to soften the horror of what had been done to her. As Rowan lifted her out, he could feel how light she was, how fragile she seemed in his arms. Red and blue lights began to flash across the wet pavement as police cars pulled into the lot. Wade's shoulders slumped in defeat as officers approached with weapons drawn, shouting commands. But Rowan's focus remained entirely on Tansy, carrying her toward the clinic's shelter. Hazel trotted alongside them, her tail wagging despite her exhaustion. The dog's maternal instincts had never wavered, from protecting her pup to ensuring Tansy's rescue. June met them at the clinic door with water and a clean blanket, her eyes brimming with tears of relief. Inside, they settled Tansy on the exam room table while waiting for the ambulance. June carefully cut away the zip ties while Rowan checked the girl's vital signs. Despite her ordeal, she was remarkably stable, dehydrated and frightened, but without serious physical injury. "You were so brave," June told her, helping her sip water slowly. "Both you and Hazel were incredibly brave." Tansy's small hand reached out to stroke the shepherd's wet fur. "She would lay next to the truck at night," she said softly. "I could hear her out there. It helped me not feel so alone." Rowan swallowed past the lump in his throat. All his doubts about his instincts, all his fears about making the wrong call, they vanished in the face of this moment. Trusting that something was wrong, Refusing to give in to Wade's demands, following Hazel's lead, it had all led to this rescue. Through the window they could see Wade being handcuffed and placed in a police car. Deputy Morell appeared in the doorway, radio in hand. "Ambulance is 2 minutes out," she reported. "You did good, Doc." "Real good." Rowan nodded, but his attention stayed on Tansy and the dog who had never given up on finding her. June was already gathering information for the paramedics, the girl's condition, how they'd found her, what immediate care they'd provided. Her efficiency and courage throughout the entire ordeal had been remarkable. The wail of the ambulance grew closer, and Rowan began preparing Tansy for transfer to their care. "You'll be with your family soon," he promised her, "and I'll make sure Hazel and her pup are well taken care of until they can find a proper home." Tansy's grip on Hazel's fur tightened slightly. Could she maybe come with me? Just to the hospital? I don't want to be alone again." June looked at Rowan, who was already nodding. "I think that can be arranged," he said softly. "After all, she's your guardian angel. She never gave up on finding you." The ambulance's lights joined the police car's display, painting the rain-slicked parking lot in swirling colors. As paramedics hurried in with their equipment, Rowan stepped back to let them work, but stayed close enough to reassure Tansy. June's hand found his arm and squeezed gently, a silent acknowledgement of what they'd accomplished together. Outside, the storm was beginning to ease, as if nature itself was acknowledging that the worst had passed. The night's darkness was giving way to the first hints of dawn, and with it came the profound realization that trust in instinct, courage in the face of threat, and unwavering determination had combined to save a precious life. Relief flooded through Rowan's body as he helped lift Tansy from the hidden compartment. The 8-year-old girl was weak and frightened, but alive. June quickly wrapped a blanket around Tansy's trembling shoulders while Hazel pressed protectively against the child's legs, her amber eyes vigilant. But their moment of victory shattered in an instant. Wade's face contorted with rage as he yanked open his truck's glove compartment. The metallic glint of a pistol caught the clinic's security lights. Before anyone could react, he raised the weapon and squeezed the trigger. The first shot cracked through the night air like thunder. Glass exploded inward as the bullet pierced the clinic's front window. The second shot found its mark, the oxygen tank propped under the bay door. The impact sparked against the metal cylinder, and for a horrifying second, time seemed to freeze. Then chaos erupted. The oxygen tank became a missile, rocketing across the clinic floor with a deafening screech of metal on concrete. It pinballed off walls and equipment, leaving destruction in its wake. The force sent it careening through the kennels, shredding metal cages and spewing deadly fragments in all directions. Rowan's medical training kicked in as pure instinct. He lunged forward, wrapping his arms around June and pulling her down behind the reception desk. His body covered hers as shrapnel whizzed overhead, embedding itself in walls and furniture. The sound was devastating, screeching metal, shattering glass, and the terrified yelps of the animals still in their cages. "Stay down!" he shouted, feeling June trembling beneath him. Through the chaos, he caught glimpses of Hazel's incredible protective instinct in action. The shepherd mix had positioned herself squarely in front of Tansy, using her own body as a shield. Her teeth were bared in a snarl directed at Wade, but she wouldn't leave the girl's side. Even as metal fragments peppered her fur, Hazel stood her ground. The tiny examination room had become a war zone. Medical supplies scattered across the floor, mixing with broken glass and twisted metal. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, creating strobing shadows that made the scene even more disorienting. The acrid smell of gunpowder mixed with the sharp tang of antiseptic from shattered bottles. Tansy's scream pierced through the cacophony, raw with terror. The sound tore at Rowan's heart, but he couldn't reach her yet, not with Wade still firing through the broken windows. Another shot rang out, sending a fresh spray of glass cascading down. "June," Rowan whispered urgently. "Your phone, is it still recording?" She nodded against his shoulder, her hands shaking but still gripping the device. "Got everything," she managed through clenched teeth, including the gun. That evidence would be crucial later, but right now, survival was their only priority. The oxygen tank had finally spent its energy, coming to rest in a twisted heap near the back door. But the danger was far from over. Wade's shadow loomed in the doorway, the pistol searching for targets. Rowan's mind raced. The police were on their way. June had called them before they'd rescued Tansy, but they were still minutes out. In a rural area like Willow Bend, response times were never quick enough. They had to protect Tansy and survive until help arrived. A pain in his shoulder made him wince. Looking down, he saw a piece of shrapnel had sliced through his lab coat, leaving a bloody gash. The adrenaline had masked the injury until now. June noticed too, her eyes widening with concern. "I'm fine," he assured her, though the wound stung fiercely. "We need to get to Tansy." The girl had pressed herself against the far wall, making herself as small as possible. Hazel remained her steadfast guardian, the dog's muscles coiled and ready to attack if Wade came any closer. Fig, Hazel's pup, had wedged himself between Tansy's feet, adding his own tiny body to the protective barrier. The loyalty of these animals, even in the face of gunfire and chaos, struck Rowan deeply. They'd known all along that Tansy needed help. Their instincts had led him to this moment, and now they were willing to die to protect her. Another shot cracked through the air, closer this time. Wade was getting bolder, advancing into the clinic. The crunch of his boots on broken glass seemed deafening in the momentary quiet. "Come out, Doc." Wade's voice was eerily calm, almost conversational. "We can still work this out. Just hand over the girl and the dogs and everyone walks away." Rowan felt June's hand grip his arm. They both knew that was a lie. Wade had crossed a line when he pulled that trigger. There was no walking away now. This was about survival. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Rowan's shoulders. 4 lives depended on his next decisions: June, Tansy, Hazel, and Fig. The oath he'd taken as a veterinarian had been to prevent animal suffering, but tonight it had expanded to include human lives as well. He couldn't let Wade take Tansy back to whatever nightmare she'd been rescued from. Through the wreckage of his clinic, his life's work reduced to twisted metal and broken glass, Rowan began forming a plan. They needed to keep Wade occupied until help arrived. The building he knew so intimately had become a battlefield, but that meant he knew every corner, every potential hiding place, every possible advantage. He leaned close to June's ear, whispering instructions. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded in understanding. They would only get one chance at this. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, but they still sounded too far away. They had to act now. The scene remained frozen in a terrible tableau. Wade advancing through the wreckage, weapon raised, Hazel standing guard over Tansy with unwavering determination. June and Rowan crouched behind the desk, planning their next move. And everywhere, the glint of metal fragments catching the emergency lights, like stars scattered across a battlefield. The night was far from over, and the true test of their courage was just beginning. In that moment, Rowan silently thanked whatever instinct had made him pause when Wade first brought Hazel in for euthanasia. That small act of trust in his gut feeling had led them here. To terror and danger, yes, but also to the chance to save an innocent life. Now they just had to survive the night. The acrid smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the air, mixing with the metallic scent of blood, both human and animal. Small whimpers came from the remaining intact kennels, where the clinic's other patients huddled in terror. Every sound seemed magnified in the tense atmosphere: the crunch of glass under Wade's boots, Tansy's frightened breathing, the low growl rumbling continuously from Hazel's throat. Fragments of metal and glass continued to settle, tinkling softly as they fell. The destruction was complete. Medical equipment lay scattered and broken, cabinets hung off their hinges, and the once sterile surfaces were covered in debris. But among the chaos, 4 hearts beat with determination, united in their will to survive. The night had started with a simple act of compassion, a veterinarian unwilling to euthanize a healthy dog. Now it had escalated into a fight for survival, with the lives of an innocent child and loyal animals hanging in the balance. The transformation of the peaceful clinic into a battlefield was a stark reminder of how quickly life could change, how a moment's decision could spiral into something much larger. Wade's footsteps drew closer, and Rowan tightened his grip on June's shoulder. They would need perfect timing for their plan to work. The sound of approaching sirens grew slightly louder, but help was still too far away. They were on their own for now, facing a desperate man with nothing left to lose. The chaos in the clinic escalated as shards of metal from the exploding oxygen tank ricocheted off walls and equipment. Rowan's heart pounded against his ribs as he assessed their dire situation. The familiar antiseptic smell of the clinic now mixed with the acrid scent of scorched metal and gunpowder. Through the mayhem, Rowan's veterinary training kicked in. When animals are panicked, they seek familiar spaces. The same principle often applied to humans. His gaze darted to the kennel corridor, a narrow passageway lined with steel cages where they housed recovering patients. The heavy guillotine door at its end, designed to contain aggressive animals, could be their salvation. "June!" Rowan called out, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "Get Tansy and Hazel to safety in the storage room. Lock the door." June nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes as she guided the trembling girl and the protective shepherd mix away from danger. The veterinary technician's movements were quick but careful, keeping low to avoid drawing Wade's attention. Rowan took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had spent years doubting his instincts. But not today. Not when lives depended on his next move. He stepped into Wade's line of sight, deliberately catching the armed man's attention. "Looking for me, Wade?" Rowan's voice carried across the clinic's debris-strewn floor. "You've already lost. The police are coming." Wade's face twisted with desperate fury. The gun in his hand shook slightly, but his grip remained firm. "Shut up! You've ruined everything." Rowan began backing slowly toward the kennel corridor, maintaining eye contact with Wade. Each step was measured, deliberate. "The girl is safe now. It's over. Nothing's over until I say it is." Wade advanced, following Rowan's retreat exactly as hoped. The man's boots crunched over scattered glass and metal fragments. Out of the corner of his eye, Rowan caught June's subtle movement. She had positioned herself near the guillotine door's release mechanism, hidden from Wade's view by a tall supply cabinet. Her face was pale but determined. Rowan continued his careful backward progress, drawing Wade deeper into the corridor. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting uncertain shadows. Empty kennels lined both walls, their metal doors reflecting distorted images of the unfolding scene. Wade raised the pistol higher, aiming directly at Rowan's chest. "Stop moving. I should have known you'd be trouble, always trying to save everything that comes through your door." "It's what I do," Rowan replied calmly, though his heart hammered. He was nearly in position now, just a few feet from the guillotine door. "I help those who can't help themselves." Wade's finger tightened on the trigger. "Well, Doctor, looks like you can't help yourself now." Time seemed to slow. Rowan saw Wade's muscles tense, preparing to fire. But before the trigger could complete its journey, June slammed the release lever with all her strength. The heavy steel door dropped like its namesake, a solid mass of metal designed to contain the most dangerous animals. Wade's eyes widened in shock as the door crashed down on his extended arm. The impact forced a scream from his throat, and the gun clattered to the floor, sliding away from his trapped hand. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder with each passing second. Help was finally arriving. Wade thrashed against the door, but it held firm, his face contorted with pain and fury as he realized he was caught. "You'll pay for this. Both of you." Rowan stepped forward, careful to stay out of Wade's reach. "No, Wade. You're the one who's going to pay for kidnapping, animal abuse, and attempted murder." June emerged from her hiding spot, her hand still trembling slightly but her voice steady. "And we have it all on video. Every threat, every shot fired." The sirens grew deafening as police vehicles pulled into the clinic's parking lot, their red and blue lights painting the walls in alternating colors. Through the windows, Rowan could see multiple officers approaching, weapons drawn. Wade sagged against the door that trapped him, the fight draining from his body as reality set in. His criminal enterprise was finished, exposed by the very animals he had tried to use as tools in his scheme. Rowan met June's eyes across the corridor, seeing his own relief reflected there. They had done it. Together they had protected not only their four-legged patients, but had helped save a young girl's life. Despite the chaos and danger, they had proven that their small clinic was more than just a struggling business. It was a place where justice could prevail. The heavy thud of police boots approached the clinic's entrance. The immediate threat was contained, thanks to quick thinking and teamwork. Rowan felt a weight lift from his shoulders, though he knew there would be questions to answer and statements to give. But for now, they had won. Wade was trapped and helpless, his arm secured by the very door designed to protect the clinic's most vulnerable patients. Through the window, Rowan caught a glimpse of Deputy Cass Morrell leading the response team. The cavalry had arrived, ready to take over and ensure that Wade would face the consequences of his actions. The night's terror was finally coming to an end, with both justice and mercy served in equal measure. The wail of police sirens grew louder, cutting through the storm as red and blue lights began to flash against the clinic's rain-streaked windows. Deputy Cass Morrell's patrol car skidded into the parking lot first, followed by 3 more cruisers that fanned out to block any possible escape routes. The sound of car doors slamming echoed through the night as officers emerged with weapons drawn. Inside the clinic, Wade remained trapped by the guillotine door, his gun arm pinned and useless. His face had drained of color, a sheen of sweat visible on his forehead as he realized the gravity of his situation. The fight had gone out of him, replaced by the desperate look of a cornered animal. "Police!" Coming in. Deputy Cass's authoritative voice boomed through the entrance. She entered first, her service weapon at the ready, flanked by 2 other officers. The beam of her tactical flashlight cut through the dim interior, revealing the aftermath of destruction, scattered medical supplies, overturned equipment, and the twisted remains of the oxygen tank. "Back here!" June called out, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "We've got him contained." Rowan stood guard near the kennel corridor, keeping a wary eye on Wade while maintaining a safe distance. His scrubs were torn and dirty, but his expression showed grim satisfaction. They'd managed to hold out long enough for help to arrive. Deputy Cass quickly assessed the scene, her experienced eyes taking in every detail. "Dr. Kincaid, miss. Lyles, are you both all right?" She moved forward carefully, signaling her fellow officers to secure the perimeter. "We're okay," Rowan confirmed, finally allowing himself to feel the ache in his muscles. "The girl, Tansy Rourke, she's safe. She's with Hazel, the shepherd mix, in the examination room." One of the officers immediately headed to check on Tansy, while Cass and her partner approached Wade. The trapped man didn't resist as they carefully maneuvered around the guillotine door to handcuff him. The metallic click of the cuffs closing seemed to echo with finality through the clinic. "Wade Torrey," Cass recited, her voice hard. "You're under arrest for kidnapping, attempted murder, animal cruelty, and trafficking. You have the right to remain silent." As she continued reading Wade his rights, June retrieved her phone, which had recorded crucial evidence. "Deputy," she called out, "I've got video of everything that happened here, and there's more. The capsule we found inside Hazel, it's some kind of tracking device. I think it's part of something bigger." Cass's eyes narrowed with interest. "We'll need that phone as evidence. And we'll want to take a careful look at that capsule." She turned to Wade, who had remained sullenly silent. "Though I have a feeling Mr. Torrey here might be ready to tell us exactly who he's working for." Wade's shoulders slumped further, the fight completely gone from him. "I want a deal," he muttered, avoiding everyone's eyes. "That's not up to me," Cass replied coolly. "But cooperation tends to look good to the district attorney." More officers arrived, including evidence technicians who began documenting everything in the clinic. The capsule was carefully extracted from where Rowan had secured it, sealed in an evidence bag, and marked for priority analysis. Serial numbers and electronic signatures within the device would soon tell their own story. In the examination room, Tansy sat on the floor, her arms wrapped around Hazel's neck. The German Shepherd mix hadn't left the girl's side since her rescue, as if she understood her role as protector wasn't quite finished. Fig, her pup, bounced around them both, bringing small smiles to Tansy's tear-streaked face. Rowan and June stood in the doorway, watching the scene with heavy hearts and profound relief. A social worker had arrived to care for Tansy, but they'd agreed to give her a few more minutes with the dogs who had helped save her life. "You were right," June said softly to Rowan. "About all of it. From the very first moment when you refused to put Hazel down." Rowan nodded, too drained for words. His instincts, the ones he'd doubted for so long, had led him true when it mattered most. The investigation moved quickly after that night. The sophisticated tracking device proved to be the key that unlocked everything. Within 24 hours, forensic technicians had traced its manufacturing signature to a shell company owned by Harlan Devereux, the prominent warehouse magnate whose facilities dotted the region's transportation corridors. Devereux's carefully constructed facade began to crumble as search warrants were executed across his properties. Hidden compartments in trucks, secret rooms in warehouses, and encrypted computers revealed a vast network of human trafficking that had operated beneath the veneer of legitimate business for years. The warehouse magnate was arrested at his mansion 3 days after Wade's capture. The sight of the distinguished-looking man in handcuffs made headlines across the state. His silver hair was mussed, his expensive suit wrinkled, as federal agents led him past a wall of cameras and reporters. The domino effect was stunning in its speed and scope. Wade's confession, combined with the evidence from Devereux's operation, led to dozens of arrests. Local police departments, state agencies, and federal task forces coordinated to dismantle the trafficking pipeline piece by piece. Each day brought news of more suspects in custody, more victims rescued, more families reunited. 1 week after the night that had changed everything, Rowan and June stood in the repaired clinic, watching through the window as Hazel and Fig played in the fenced yard. The Shepherd mix had recovered fully from her ordeal, though she would always bear the scar from the capsule's implantation. "The Rorks want to adopt them both," June said, smiling as she watched Fig tackle his mother playfully in the grass. "Tansy insisted, said they're her guardian angels." Rowan felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the morning sun streaming through the window. "They belong together," he agreed, "after everything they've been through." The clinic phone rang, and June answered it with renewed energy. The past week had brought an unexpected surge of support from the community. As word of their role in breaking up the trafficking ring spread, people had begun bringing their animals to the clinic again. Old clients returned, new ones arrived, and the financial pressure that had weighed so heavily on Rowan began to ease. But more important than the business revival was the reminder of why he'd become a veterinarian in the first place. Every animal that came through his doors could be carrying a story, could be part of something larger than itself. His job wasn't just to treat their ailments, but to listen to what they were trying to tell him. Outside, Hazel paused in her play to look toward the clinic, her amber eyes meeting Rowan's through the window. Her tail wagged once, a gesture of recognition and trust. She was a living reminder of the night when instinct and compassion had overcome doubt and fear, when a small rural clinic had become the flashpoint for bringing down a criminal empire. The evidence collected from the capsule had done more than expose Devereux's operation. It had revealed the truth that Rowan had always known in his heart, that every life, whether human or animal, was worth fighting for, that sometimes the smallest creatures could lead to the largest revelations. That justice, while not always swift, could prevail when good people refused to look away from wrong. As the morning wore on, Rowan and June settled back into their routine, treating the day's patients with renewed purpose. The clinic's atmosphere had changed subtly but significantly. Where once there had been uncertainty and worry about the future, now there was quiet confidence and hope. A framed newspaper article hung on the wall near the reception desk, its headline bold and clear: "Local vet clinic key to breaking trafficking ring." Below it was a photo of Hazel and Tansy, the girl's arms wrapped around the shepherd mix's neck, both of them safe and healing. It served as a daily reminder that sometimes the most important victories came not from grand gestures, but from simply refusing to ignore what was wrong, from trusting one's instincts, and from having the courage to stand firm when it would have been easier to look away. The last of Devereux's network was rounded up within 2 weeks of the initial arrests. The evidence trail had been too clear, the documentation too thorough for anyone to escape justice. The warehouse magnate's empire, built on human suffering and hidden crimes, collapsed completely under the weight of multiple federal investigations. Through it all, Hazel remained at the clinic until the day the Rorks came to take her and Fig home. As Rowan watched them leave, the dogs bouncing happily alongside Tansy and her parents, he felt a deep sense of completion. The circle that had begun on that stormy night had closed, bringing healing and justice in its wake. June stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "We did good," she said simply. Rowan nodded, watching until the Rorks' car disappeared around the corner. "We did," he agreed. "And we'll keep doing it, one patient at a time." The clinic sign swung gently in the breeze, its letters bright and clean against the morning sky. Inside, the phone was ringing with another call, another animal in need of care. Rowan turned away from the window, ready to face whatever challenge came next, knowing that he would meet it with renewed confidence and purpose. 2 weeks after that stormy night that changed everything, Rowan stood in his clinic's waiting room, holding a stack of adoption papers. His hands trembled slightly as he signed his name on the final line, making it official. Hazel and Fig were now permanent residents of Willowbend Animal Clinic. "Well, what do you think about that?" he asked, kneeling down to scratch behind Hazel's ears. Her tail thumped steadily against the floor as she pressed her head into his palm. Fig, ever the enthusiastic pup, bounced around them both, yipping with excitement as if he understood the significance of the moment. June watched from behind the reception desk, her eyes bright with emotion. "They've been yours since that night, Doc. This just makes it official." Rowan nodded, his throat tight. The German shepherd mix and her scrappy little pup had done more than just expose a criminal operation. They'd helped him find his way back to himself. Every morning when he unlocked the clinic doors, they were there to greet him, Hazel's amber eyes full of steady trust and Fig's whole body wiggling with joy. The clinic itself had transformed in the weeks since Wade's arrest. News of how a small-town vet and his team had helped crack open Harlan Devereux's trafficking operation had spread quickly. Where empty appointment slots had once stretched across their calendar, now they had a steady stream of clients. People wanted their pets treated by the doctor who had trusted his instincts to save not just 2 dogs, but a little girl's life. "I've got some good news," June said, holding up her phone. "Tansy's mum called. They're home from the hospital, and Tansy's asking if Hazel can come visit." Rowan's face broke into a warm smile. "I think we can arrange that. What do you say, girl?" he asked Hazel, who perked up at the mention of Tansy's name. The bond between the dog and the 8-year-old had only grown stronger during Tansy's recovery. Later that afternoon, Rowan pulled up to a cheerful yellow house with a wraparound porch. Hazel sat in the passenger seat, her posture alert and eager. As soon as he opened the car door, she bounded up the front steps where Tansy waited. "Hazel!" The little girl's face lit up as she wrapped her arms around the dog's neck. Though still pale from her ordeal, Tansy looked worlds better than she had that night in the truck. The dark circles under her eyes had faded, and her smile reached all the way to her eyes. Dr. Kincaid, Tansy's mother, appeared in the doorway, wiping tears from her eyes as she watched her daughter laugh, while Hazel covered her face with gentle kisses. "I don't know how we can ever thank you enough." "Hazel did all the work," Rowan said modestly, but he couldn't help feeling proud as he watched the reunion. "She knew exactly where to find Tansy. I just had to trust her." They spent an hour visiting, with Tansy showing Hazel her room and the special bed they'd bought for when the dog could come stay overnight. Rowan marveled at how the little girl who'd been through so much trauma could still laugh so freely, especially with Hazel by her side. Back at the clinic that evening, Rowan worked on patient charts while Fig napped in his special bed under the desk. The pup had grown noticeably in the past weeks, though he still maintained his role as Hazel's fierce protector. Every morning, he insisted on checking each exam room before letting his mother enter, making Rowan smile at his determined little routine. The sun had long since set when June knocked softly on his office door. "Last patient's gone home. I've cleaned the kennels and restocked the exam rooms." Rowan looked up, noticed how the warm light from his desk lamp caught the auburn highlights in her hair. These quiet moments after closing had become precious to them both, a time when the day's work was done and they could just be themselves. "Thanks, June. You don't have to stay so late, you know." She smiled, leaning against the doorframe. "I know, but I want to." The simple honesty in her words made his heart skip. Their relationship had shifted since that night, growing deeper in the quiet moments they shared. There was no need to rush or define it. They both understood that something profound had changed between them. "Remember what you told me that first day I came to work here?" June asked, moving to sit in the chair across from his desk. "About how being a vet isn't just about the medicine, it's about trusting your gut when something feels wrong." Rowan nodded, thinking back to the young veterinary technician who'd shown up at his door, fresh out of school but already showing the kind of instincts that couldn't be taught. "You proved it that night," she continued. "Everyone else might have just seen a stray dog and her pup, but you saw something more. You trusted your instincts even when it would have been easier not to." He glanced down at Fig, still curled up and snoring softly. "I almost didn't." If Fig hadn't blocked that syringe. But he did. "And you listened." June reached across the desk to touch his hand. "That's what makes you special, Doc. You've always known how to listen to what animals are trying to tell us. You just needed to be reminded to trust yourself again." Rowan felt something loosen in his chest, the last remnants of doubt that had haunted him for so long. The weight of past failures that had made him question every decision, second-guess his own judgment, began to lift. Looking around his office, he saw the photos of successful cases on the walls with new eyes. Each one represented a life saved, a family helped, a trust honored. And now Hazel and Fig's picture had joined them, a reminder that sometimes the biggest victories came from simply refusing to ignore what felt wrong. "I should probably head home," June said softly, though she made no move to leave. "Probably," Rowan agreed, equally reluctant to end the moment. Hazel chose that moment to pad into the office, her nails clicking gently on the floor. She moved between them, resting her head on June's knee before turning to press against Rowan's leg, as if to say, "These are my people now." June laughed, scratching the dog's ears. "I think someone's trying to tell us something." "She's good at that," Rowan said, smiling as he watched them together. The sight filled him with a quiet joy. His family, unexpected but perfectly right. Finally, they began the closing routine. June gathered her things while Rowan did a final check of the treatment area. Fig trotted alongside Hazel as they made their nightly inspection of the kennels, the pup taking his security duties very seriously. At the front door, June paused. "See you tomorrow." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Rowan replied, and the smile they shared held all the promise of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. After June's car disappeared down the dark street, Rowan stood for a moment under the clinic's porch light. Hazel pressed against his side, her solid warmth a reminder that he was exactly where he needed to be. Fig leaned against his other leg, letting out a contented sigh. As he locked the door one last time, Rowan felt the rightness of it all settle into his bones. The past few weeks had taught him that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was trust yourself. Trust your training, your instincts, and your heart. Here, with his four-legged family beside him, and the quiet certainty of June's smile in his mind, he was finally at peace with who he had become. The clinic sign cast a gentle glow over them as they walked to his truck. Willowbend Animal Clinic, Doctor? Rowan Kincaid. It read. Once those words had felt like a burden of expectations he could never quite meet. Now they were simply a statement of fact. This was who he was, who he had always been meant to be. Hazel jumped into the passenger seat with practiced ease, while Rowan lifted Fig up beside her. As he started the engine, he glanced at his companions, the brave mother who had helped save a child's life, her loyal pup who had saved them all by refusing to let him make a terrible mistake, and himself, a country vet who had finally learned to trust his own heart. The truck pulled away from the clinic, heading toward home. In the rearview mirror, Rowan watched the building recede into the darkness. Tomorrow they would be back, ready to help whatever animals and people needed them. But for now, this moment was enough. Driving through the quiet night with his family beside him, certain at last of his place in the world. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.